Well, and we talk about a lot how we hire, train, and fire to core values, right?
Yes.
And we do that not just with employees, but actually with clients in some
Yes.
ways, right?
How do you define an actual core value? Is it an adjective? Is it a verb? Is it an emotional thing? Is it an intellectual thing? Because when you start throwing this concept out, core values becomes a fuzzy word. I'm Michael Redmond.
And I'm Kathryn Redmond.
And today we're going to talk about using core values to scale your company, the power of it, where it fits, why it's important, and some discussion around some examples of what that looks like.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about core values and how you can use core values to help scale your company, right? So core values is something we talk about a ton. We talk about it with all of our clients. Why are core values so important?
Well, core values are part of the core chemistry, pardon the repetition there, the core chemistry of a company and its culture.
Yeah.
If you want to set up your company so that it knows how it's going to behave, you need to codify your core values. Now, some companies have 7, 8, 9. As a general rule of thumb, if you can have 3 to 5, that's really good. There are other values in your company that are important. But the core values, if you can't figure out how to articulate the core values on the way people are supposed to behave and what it does to bring value to the customer, you will have a really difficult time scaling because it'll all be in your head. It'll all be interpretive for everybody in the company, and nobody will be able to coach each other. You won't be able to say, hey, you're not behaving in a way that's appropriate for the company.
Yep.
That's what core values do. And so then you start going, okay, what does that look like? For instance, one of our core values is kindness.
That it is.
And we talk about and coach, we have a description about what kindness means. And then we can coach through that. And when somebody's doing it well, we can recognize them. And when they're not, then we can correct that.
Yeah. Well, and we talk about a lot how we hire, train, and fire to core values, right?
Yes.
And we do that not just with employees, but actually with clients in
Yes.
some ways, right? So
100%.
kindness is one of those values that like we don't want to work with people who are unkind. Like life is too short to work with unkind clients.
Yeah. It's funny because Google has kind of the no asshole culture.
Yep.
And yet what's interesting is their culture is shifting. Their culture values are shifting. I saw an article recently, like in the last week, that there was a memo that went out. So this interesting thing happened is basically the memo that went out in the last month or so was from the CEO basically saying, look, your politics don't belong here. This is not a place to goof off. This is a place to work. This is a place that needs to be safe for people to work in, so on and so forth. Well, what drove that was several of the employees decided to do a sit-in and picket outside of the company. And so there were picket signs. I saw the video of it, picket signs and all kinds of different stuff, and people screaming and yelling about stuff. And they were issues about Israel and Palestine.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going around.
Okay.
Columbia
so,
University.
So take that and go back 2 years at Google, and it happened then on a different subject. There was like 150, 200 people or something like that. A lot of people who were doing it 2 years ago, and they were demanding that the head of the company do something. And basically they were, it was almost like they were treating it like Google is a government and they're citizens of the government and they can free speech and all this kind of stuff. And 2 years ago, they picketed. What did you do? Sit in or whatever you call it. And there's a word for when activists go out and do all that kind of stuff. But anyway, they were picketing in front of the building and demanding that
striking.
No, they weren't striking because they
all
weren't.
I can think of is unions.
But basically, they came out and they said, we demand that Google do X, Y, Z contract wise with a certain company or a certain country or something like that. And the leaders did it. They actually behaved. This was 2 years ago.
And now it's like, nope.
This last month, 3 employees were fired. The memo went out. We don't do business like that anymore. And
Interesting.
this is not the culture we have anymore. We are shifting our culture. Without saying their core values were significant, they came down and said basically the free love, fun for all thing in the world out there, blah, 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 is not how we're going to create this company anymore. We are in a competitive nature. AI is the battlefield right now.
Hmm.
Google is trying everything they can to hold their ground and actually even hold the ground in search. And there's conversation that they could even lose their competitive edge in search. So what does all that look like? Well, they shifted their culture.
Yeah.
How are they going to compete in the marketplace and grow? They're doing this. Now, it'll be interesting to see if they actually come back to their core values and reevaluate them and restate them, because innovation is one of those things. But I wish I had that right now, because the blurb that was read on uh, in whatever newscast I was watching from the memo was pretty straight up. Get your shit together without cussing. Pardon my language. And it was amazing.
Wow.
But that's a culture so critical in the way a company's been, because their culture has really driven their innovation and the way they've done things and the way they've grown.
Mhm.
And it's allowed them to scale immensely with their technology and their culture. But they've done a lot of different
Hmm.
things.
Interesting. So let's pull it back to now, kind of our audience, which is more the smaller, not quite so massive. We don't have 200 people sit ins most days. Um,
Yeah.
so when it comes to a smaller to medium sized company that's looking to grow and scale, what I hear you saying is that establishing those core values, this is not just what we do, but how we do it.
Yeah.
These are the behaviors that we are going to operate in. And if you don't articulate and codify those, it's very hard to hold that standard. And it becomes then more difficult to scale because there's a little bit more erratic stuff going on in your culture,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think that when you're smaller, the tendency is to think, well, we just live in our values and people see it and they just know, right? It's an oral culture, it's verbal. Everybody knows how we operate around here.
Right.
But when we talk about what it looks like to codify,
Yeah.
part of that is let's make sure that everyone means the same thing, right? Let's make sure we're articulating what are those things that are go no go kinds of values, the things that would cause you to want to shut your company down if those things are violated. Like, we are not going to do business that way. What are those things so that everybody's on the same page and there's no guesswork?
No, that's good. Well, and the codification or the codifying of those core values is critical.
It is.
The problem is we don't, as human beings, we're usually pretty busy. We're doing stuff. We either don't do things we need to do because we're moving too fast,
Mhm.
or we don't do things we need to do because we don't know them. We don't know what to do, and we don't know why we don't know why it's important. We've heard we're supposed to do something, but we have no idea why it's important.
Right. And especially when you deal with companies like I was just talking with one of our employees yesterday about one of our clients where I mean they've grown and they've done a great job and they're killing it out there, and yet when asked, "Can you tell me your core values?" it was like,
Well, what was interesting about that company, and we've talked about core values for a very long time, and we learn core values in the conversation of codifying core values from multiple places, but one of the places that probably talked about it the best was Build the book
Good to great.
Good to Great,
Jim Collins.
and his book before that, even Build Something. But Jim Collins in his work out of the 90s,
Mhm.
and then other folks talking about the culture stuff even before that. There were other writers and doing a great job of how do you articulate the way your company is going to behave and what it's not going to be, how it's not going to behave. What's interesting is those core values. It's like, how do you define an actual core value? Is it an adjective? Is it a verb? Is it an emotional thing? Is it an intellectual thing? Because when you start throwing this concept out, its core values becomes a fuzzy word,
Mhm.
right? A fuzzy being, as we talk about fuzzy, it's a well-known word, but it could mean 10 different things to 10 different people.
Right.
So you have to define really what you're saying for the context and culture.
Yep.
Okay. So you've got this idea of what kind of emotion or what kind of word do you use? And it's interesting with that company you were mentioning, because the first thing that jumped off the page at me is they had core values, but the core values that they articulated, that they collected, were all technical values.
Mhm.
There was nothing about behavior.
Yeah.
It was innovation. It was I forget what they were, but they were super technical in the sense of th- this is what we're going to do. Now they were an engineering company and a manufacturing company. So I realized, oh, that was a predisposed grid they had
Mhm.
of this. And that's what people want, right? They want us to be technically excellent. I think that was it. Excellence was one of their core values. Well, how do you define excellence?
Mhm.
And what does that look like? And is it because we as a company are we're going to do excellent work, high level work? Is it going to be, we're going to innovate new products? What is that? Okay. I can see how you can start to go, well, our employees need to be excellent because the product they're delivering has to meet high standards.
Right.
We want the people to trust the product because the product is used in, well, it's fuel tanks. And so you look at that and you go, okay, that's important. Those can't leak. That has to work in a vehicle. Do you want people to innovate and make sure that as cars are moving along, is there any technology that we can do with fuel tanks? Different ways we can use them in agriculture or trucking or entertainment or overlanding or something like that. But there was nothing in there that said, how are we going to interact with each other, and how do we engage people? And how do I say this in a non-nerdy way? Right?
Like, how do we actually sound human? That
I mean, because you could be,
non-nerdy human.
because all those things could be very machinish.
Mhm.
You could be on the spectrum. You could be somebody who's horrible at relationships.
Yeah.
And none of those values talk about being good at communication or interacting or relationships or caring.
Yeah.
And so what does that look like? We have another friend who does a lot of consulting and stuff, Ryan Dice. And Ryan is regularly said there are pay to play values.
Mhm.
And basically, you don't use those values because that's just like, you got to do honesty, trust,
Integrity.
integrity. Don't ever use those because that's just like, if you don't have those, you can't,
Yeah, don't show up to the
you can't
game.
show up. You're not going to make any money. Nobody's going to hire you. Nobody's going to pay you money. Well, I disagree with that. I think there's plenty of companies out there that attract people without any
I
integrity.
think so too.
And even though,
Ah.
what's interesting is, even though he might not call those the core values of the company, they are integrated in his core values, and they're so integrated in his core values, he's not going to.
They're not worth articulating
Yeah, it's
in
like,
some ways,
why would
right?
I talk about this?
Like,
Because
everybody does this, don't they?
if you're not,
This is like the norm.
if you're
Like,
a
oh,
jerk,
is it
I'm not
though?
going to hire you. If you don't have integrity, I'm
Yeah.
going to fire you.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. But wouldn't it have been appropriate to tell people that? I think in today's world, you have to be really careful, even more than you used to be, of what you're assuming people know and what they don't know. How many employers are going,
Yeah.
there's no common sense in the younger generation because they weren't taught it in school.
Well, yeah, it's almost like I keep thinking about the idea that even what Ryan's talking about, and I get it. Like he's looking at a room full of entrepreneurs, like you have to be good people, like just
Yeah.
deal with that. And I understand that, but it is almost like you're giving people junior high values when they are still in first grade. And you're assuming they understand everything that came before, right? So why would we articulate something like kindness? Isn't that just like kindness? It's normal. It's like you're supposed to be kind. We get that.
Yeah.
And yet for us to say something like kindness as a core value is it's like there's a defining of this is critical in how we interact, how we treat each other, how we talk, how we approach problems,
Yep.
how we manage failure, right? All of those things are affected by that core value of kindness. You don't hear people yelling and screaming at each other in our office.
Right.
You don't hear us yelling at clients. You don't hear clients yelling at us most of the time. And if they do, then something has gone terribly awry and they may or may not be clients for very
Yeah.
much longer.
Yeah.
That's only happened once in our history. So I think it is that sense of not assuming that
Mm.
people understand the behavioral values that you want to have, along with, of course, technical excellence and being good at what you do, and having something to offer that is unique in the market space. So it is an interesting conversation because not everybody agrees on what core values should be, and I think that for us, erring on the side of clarity
Mhm.
and not assuming people understand the things that are absolutely deep to who
Mhm.
you are is really critical.
Okay, so for anybody who's listening right now or watching right now, who's like, you might be saying, "What are this is nice and this is all fuzzy, but is there any evidence to any of this?" There actually is. And one of the things that is probably helpful to talk about is when you talk about Jim Collins, it actually started with research
Mhm.
of hundreds and hundreds of companies, maybe even thousands of companies that were in the Fortune 500 on the stock market, different things like that, and looking at the ones that were actually top performers.
Mhm.
And one of the major characteristics out of the top performers, and we're talking multiples of, 3, 4, 5, 6 times the average stock market price at that point, the market value itself. They were above value of the average company. And this was one of the characteristics. They had a clear, and we'll talk in other podcasts and other videos about the other parts of vision, but this is a huge part of the four aspects of vision. And it's that core values, because if you have a core purpose, a direction that the company's heading on a daily basis, this is what we do long term and how we take care of the client and what we do for the client. But this is how we behave when we do that in the
Mhm.
midst of it. That itself has been proven over and over and over and over and over again for decades into the 20th century back behind us. And even up till current days, we can see the value of the more clear your behavior is and your core values are to your employees, the more it bleeds out into your customers.
Mhm.
And your customers, it's like that like tribe, it pulls. So when we're talking about scaling, is there evidence for this? Yes. Is there evidence for the increased value? Yeah. You want to do that if you look at everything else and you go, man, I don't really have a clarity on this, or it's all really technical and esoteric and it doesn't really tell anybody how they're going to behave in a sense. Maybe think, I'm going to think
Mhm.
excellently, or
Mm.
I'm going to do excellent work. Okay, we value excellence, but is there anything in there that talks about the actual social interaction
Yeah.
also with others? Okay, that said, we started with it helps. Why does this help? It helps inside the company,
Mhm.
and it helps with staff. It helps with having to do much less management, because people, once they understand this is what it is and this is where my borders are, they're way more comfortable with navigating in that, especially if you've hired well. If
Yeah.
you hired people that had core values, then they're going to operate within your core values so much better, especially you define them.
Yeah.
They can self-police. Your managers can actually manage better for this and reward and correct.
Mhm.
But then when you use it for marketing and values for marketing, how have we in the past seen that work for our clients? And how is it that core values even shape the way we design marketing for clients?
Well, your core values are part of the story of how you do business.
Mm,
What is it like to interact with us as a client? What can you expect, right? I mean, one of the things that we have a client we're doing some video work with recently, and this is a client who has done an excellent job of building a company using core values as just this, like, this is the defining thing. And one of the things that she says, and I think it's really really true, is because of the core values, no matter what office you visit, and they have 20 offices up and down California, you experience the same type of thing. You experience the same environment, you experience the same way of interacting, all of those things, that is powerful for marketing,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
It's kind of like the McDonald's hamburger. You can expect that it's going to be the same wherever you go. If you have your core values really clear and especially as you scale,
Mhm.
that will allow for that consistent experience that makes it worth interacting with your company.
Yeah.
And so for marketing, it both creates consistency for the customer.
Yeah.
They're not, it isn't dependent on which person they get on the phone. Like, right? Um, it means that you're going to be designing products and services or whatever it is that you're doing with the customer in mind based on those values. Everything comes back to them. So I think the power of using your core values in marketing is critical. And we translate it, we'll take a core value, whether it's kindness, and we'll turn it into something like a we believe statement.
Mhm.
Like, this is what we believe in
Yeah.
terms of how you should be interacting and how you can expect us to be. And it gives clients an opportunity to essentially evaluate, like, are we actually living up to that? And if we're not, to call us on the carpet. So I think that even the transparency piece of using your core values in marketing is critical, because what you're saying is this is who not just we aspire to be, this is who we say we are. And you are more than welcome to tell us if that's working for you or not, or if we're not doing what we say.
Yeah, and even though we don't know the core values of a particular company we interact with, whether it's Best Buy, going in and buying tech stuff, or whether it's your lawyer or a service company or a hospital or a restaurant, you can get an idea or a feel, a kind of a ballpark feel by the way you're treated.
Hmm.
If you're treated with a smile, if you're treated with some kind of respect, if somebody speaks to you and actually engages in you a little bit, depending on the context of the service.
Hmm.
So, for instance, in our Best Buy for quite a period of time, especially before COVID, I don't go in as much anymore, but it's amazing how often I went in and I would say to people, they would say, "Hi, sir, can I help you?" Clearly, they were trained and coached to go around and regularly ask. And I could get asked 2 or 3 times while in a store looking around. Are you finding everything you need? So there's that sense of we're going to value touching base with the client
Hmm.
and asking them, do they need help? And being a service minded. But one of the things that was really interesting to me was they would say, "Hi, how are you?" I would say, "Fine." Um, and then I would say, "How are you?" And they would say, "Thank you for asking." On a regular basis in our best friend, I was like, first of all, this happens too much to not be trained. Somebody's teaching them that there's some kind of, I don't know what word they're using, but they're definitely in this caring, honoring, how do you speak politely and intelligently to people
Hmm.
so that they feel valued and cared? Whether it's that or whether it's the way our staff works with our clients and interacts, where the phone is picked up from the moment the phone is picked up or from the moment they meet us somewhere out in public. It all goes back to this core statement that we learned from our mentor, Roy Williams, right? If you win the heart, the mind will follow.
Right.
It's like one of those cornerstone truths for us and for humanity. If you can win the heart, the mind will follow. If you try and convince somebody that you're a good product or service because you're giving them all the detailed intellectual information, it's
Yeah.
just facts and figures. And they are more inclined to go, fine, are you offering something that I need? Like, is it high enough quality? Do I need all that quality? And B, can I find it cheaper somewhere else?
Mhm.
Amazon is full of knockoffs
Oh God.
of, hey, why would I buy this $500, $600 suitcase when I could buy a $80 suitcase that looks basically the same?
Mm.
And when I go in the airports when we're traveling and I go in some of these places and I look at a Tumi, I go, why is this Tumi? What? I mean, I could buy 5 of the junk ones before I equal the price of a Tumi. So I'm confused. It's like I open it up and I go, it's empty just like the other ones are. And when they're selling them in those stores, there's no core values of the company. I don't know the core values of the company. I get no relationship. It's a hawk the wares type of mentality. So core values, when you can articulate them and you use them, they're great for management and fluidity and scale in your company for operations sake. but they're also fantastic for, especially if they're core to the leadership and they're actually values that somebody else values. You will attract your tribe.
Yeah. Because people want to do business with people they like.
Yes.
People they can bond with ultimately, right? Branding is bonding. And it's pretty hard to bond with a soulless, lifeless entity.
and you have people who cuss a lot in their marketing and they're vulgar a lot in their marketing, and they attract people who like that, and people who don't are going to attract people who appreciate that more. You can attract people who cuss, who don't cuss, if you don't cuss in your marketing, or if you don't vulgar in your marketing. If you're vulgar in your marketing, you're only going to attract people who are really enjoy that. So your market can be much smaller, but if you have a deep well, if your market is a deep committed group of people, whatever that is, whether it's whiskey or whether it's pickleball or something else, vulgar or not, you can leverage that, and your core values can speak to that group. And if you can bond with them like that, now you've got this thing where core values and the statistics and the history tell us this can radically shift the amount of people that are attracted to you, the amount of people that are loyal to your brand, and how well and efficient your staff stays within guidelines of who the company is. So the customer gets a consistent service experience,
Yeah.
and the employees have consistency in their job, which if you have great employees, you want to keep them. And so that's core values allows you to scale your company. It's one of the attributes that allows you to scale your company in amazing ways.